What did you invent as a kid only to find out it already existed? When I was a kid in the 80s I would draw my own made up superheroes. One would shoot 2 prongs from a thing on his wrist. I understood that the body could complete a circuit. So, they would stick in the bad guys and he could electrocute them. Turns out cops have them now. Taser Man would be a cool superhero, though. During lunch my friends and I would trade food. One day I thought of making one of the foods we traded as a standard of worth and then rating every other food based on that. Then I realized that is basically how money works. Congrats, you invented commodity-backed currency. The US needs to switch to the fruit roll-up standard. When I was really young, I thought you could create super medicine by mixing all of the current medicines together, thus curing every disease. It wasn't until I was older that I learned poison had already been invented. In your defense, as you say, death is a fantastic cure for most diseases. I invented the color rad. It was red and purple mixed together. No matter what my mom said, I insisted that I invented it and kept using the word rad to try and get it to be a thing. Congratulations, I now googled one of the dumbest things I've ever googled: what color does red and purple make? To save everyone else the time, either mauve or magenta. In about 4th grade, we had to make a product up to advertise, though we didn't necessarily have to make the product itself. I invented wake up pills, the opposite of sleeping pills. Had no idea something like energy tonics or tablets existed. Congrats, you invented M. Okay, so it was a submarine for babies, like a cradle kinda contraption that has a sealable glass top. Put your baby in and take them underwater for a limited time. Go scuba diving with them. Take them into scary wrecks or to see colorful fish. It doesn't exist, but I mean you could just take the baby in a normal submarine. Currency exchange arbitrage. Looking at the tables of exchange rates and thinking, if I go from currency A to currency B to currency C and back to currency A, there must be some choice of currencies that make you money out of thin air. I honestly thought I was a genius when I thought of this. I had an idea where everyone could have a chef to cook for them, but since not everyone could afford their own chef, you could rent one, on a per meal basis. I think I invented catering. That is also pretty much what a restaurant is. When I was about 6, my mother would occasionally say shoot when she was upset, and I inevitably took on the habit along with my best friend at the time. My mother told us to stop saying that, so we decided an acceptable compromise would be to replace part of the offending word with another sound so it would be different. We settled on crap instead of shoot, which was okay, because it was a made up word known only to us and therefore we couldn't get in trouble, right? Ha, my very religious choir teacher once called a kid in class a T, I guess because she thought twit was too harsh. The room was eerily silent after that. I wanted a logo for myself, so I began to brainstorm a bit. I used my favorite letter, L, and experimented with it. Thought one symbol looked cool as frick and I used to write it on my worksheets instead of my name. I thought I invented the coolest looking symbol at 8 years old. Too bad the Nazis got their hands on it first. I think it existed before the Nazis. It was a good luck symbol. They just took it and everyone associates it to be their symbol. Geothermal power. Somewhere in elementary school, they taught us the basics of how a nuclear power plant worked. My first thought was, why don't you replace the reactor with a volcano? As it turns out, that works. It's just not as simple as I thought it would be. Only place I know that uses geothermal a ton is Iceland. I dated this girl. When she was in elementary school, her teacher rolled out this big project, invent something. So she proudly submitted a soda can she'd cut in half and removed the center then taped back together. She thought it was better to have a smaller size option because they'd be easier to carry in kids' lunch boxes. The teacher gave her an incomplete because it wasn't original enough. By the time we dated in high school, they'd already released the mini cans loved by kids, dieters, bartenders. A cool chick, and I mean that, but if my life was a book, this would be strong foreshadowing that this cool chick is gonna know how to hold a grudge. I dated this girl when she was in elementary school. Punctuation. Folks, it matters. Ketchup. Just mixing mayonnaise and ketchup. was very upset when I was at a birthday party and found out other kids were all doing the same. I had this great idea for a book series where some kids have adventures at a magic school. Actually, I was pretty happy to find out about Harry Potter and that 3 books were out already. I found the wizard. One day I mixed Sprite and grenadine syrup together and I thought it was the greatest thing ever, and I had just invited a new soda flavor. Then I found out that B. Shirley Temple already did it. As a child I would fantasize about being He-Man, the character from Masters of the Universe, being completely naked and having my arms and legs chained to a stone bed. Tila would come over and ride me. I had basically invented a BDSM scenario. I was so surprised when I started looking at P later in life and discovered it was actually a thing. I'm kind of convinced some people are just born with an interest in BDSM. I've had such fantasies for as long as I can remember, long before I knew what sex was. If this was caused by some event, it would have to have happened when I was a baby. I've always liked playing with numbers. I was playing around with squares, as in a number multiplied by itself, not the geometric figure, and wondered if there was a way to easily come up with a square that you didn't know based off of one you did. For example, 8 raised to the power of 2 is 64. I know 9 raised to the power of 2 is 81. But what if I didn't? I know 12 raised to the power of 2 is 144. But what's 13 raised to the power of 2? I don't have that one memorized. Could there be some pattern that might be useful? So I wrote out a bunch of squares and looked at the difference between them and figure out that if the first squared number was x and the second squared number was y, then the difference was x plus y. How cool is that? So to get 13 raised to the power of 2, you could add 144 and 12 and 13 equals 169. Then I started trying to figure out how to express this in algebra. Surely someone had noticed this magic before, but maybe not. You never know. After piddling around with x and y, I finally realized that you could also keep everything just to x. After all, it was xx plus x plus x plus 1, or x raised to the power of 2 plus 2x plus 1. Wait, that looks familiar. At first I was like, damn it, but then I was like, okay, but now I know what that means and I'm a little more proud of it. The internet. So it's 1980 or so, and I discover the world of modems, and BB says, now, for the younger users, you would connect your phone to an coupler and log into other people's computers. Usually a BBS would have a single line, so if you were logged in, nobody else could be. I envisioned what would happen if the switching system could connect you to hundreds of different BBSs that would all be able to communicate with each other. I filled so many pages of a notebook planning it out. Now, anyone with half a brain knows that universities were already doing this on ARPANET, but I was young. A year later I would be detailing my plans for connected bulletin board systems to a friend who was in college. He looked at me like I was an idiot, and the next day he took me to a university computer lab. Oh god, this one is slightly embarrassing. I wasn't even a kid. I was like 15, which makes it worse. My parents used to be pretty big party people. Almost every Friday and Saturday night they had people over to our house. Well, one night one of their friends couldn't quite make it home due to a little too much of the drink. Yeah, so he passed out on our couch. I was kind of naive at 15. So I said to my mom I could just start a business that picks people up and takes them where they need to go if they can't drive. My mom looked at me like I had a dong growing out of forehead and said, yeah, you idiot. That's what taxes do, and burst out laughing. Still haven't lived that one down. You could have invented Uber if you had kept that idea. Nachos. I was making chips with cheese and accidentally got some beef in there. Thought to myself, wait, I can salvage this. Added salsa, heated it up. Thought I made my own secret food. My mom burst my bubble about a year later. Well, it didn't exist yet, but I credit myself with the invention of the iPhone. I had just bought the iPod mini, the one without color screen, and thought it was the greatest thing ever. I don't remember how old I was, but I said to an Apple Store employee, wouldn't it be great if they combined an iPod and a mobile phone? And then a few years later, bam, iPhone is invented. In-demand TV, Netflix and the DVR. I had this idea that the TV stations would mail you a set of videotapes with the next week's programming so you could pick and choose what you wanted to see. I should have patented that idea. When I was in middle school, I read a book about World War II submarines and learned that they normally ran on the surface on diesel engines, but would switch to battery power when they submerged. The diesels would recharge the batteries while running on the surface. I came up with a similar idea for cars. After expressing the idea, I was informed what a hybrid car was. The smartphone. The year was 2005 and my class got a task to invent a new kind of phone that would help us in our everyday life, and my group made a watch phone and called it a smartphone. Smartphones didn't exist in 2005. You should have patented it, stupid kid. Hey, what if you had 6 boxes with 3 stones in each? That'd be 18. What if you change the numbers? It'll be like a new way of calculating stuff. 8-year-old me was not familiar with the concept of multiplication. I felt so smart for a while, until my mum told me it exists. I wrote the bass line at the very end of Blind by Korn. It was cool cause I liked that album. Still do, but a little disheartening to lose the riff, since I felt I couldn't use it. One of the bass lines I wrote before I played for a friend to get his opinion. He came back to me a week later claiming he had wrote the bass line and that I copied him. I noticed water that condensed on the lids of saucepans was really clean, so I thought, why not boil wastewater and let the vapor condense into clean water, and then throw away the dry stuff at the bottom, and repeat. I had this little drawing of essentially a kettle with a flat, sloped lid, so clean water could trickle into another container. Anyway, then I learned about distillation. Some form of socialism. My basic premise was that there should be a list of things that needs to be done every day, and anyone who contributes a certain amount of time to helping complete the list gets everything for free. I still maintain that this would work in an ideal world, but there's no way it could ever work in reality. I remember my dad giving 4th grade me a heavily simplified explanation of why communism didn't work, and thinking that's easy, I can fix that, something about luxury incentives. Anyway, I was convinced that I'd solved all political science, forever. Bubbles. Till the age of like 6 I thought I was the only one who could blow them. My mum and dad planned this elaborate lie where they pretended like they couldn't blow them and only I could. Only at the age 6 did I realize they were fricking with me when I saw them blowing bubbles with my cousin. Melted cheese on popcorn. My mom still makes it too, and it's been about 15 years since I started making it as a fat little child. Potato chips. I loved fried potatoes and asked my mom if anyone had thought to cut them really thin and fry them so they'd be crunchy. I had $1 million idea and was eating Lay's at the time. I was 8, so I didn't make the connection between what I was eating and what I was proposing. I disassembled a model electric Halley when I was 7 and mounted the motor on the roof with the propeller still attached and ran a wire down to my room connected to a tiny light bulb. It barely lit up when there was a little wind. Thought I had invented something big at the time. Flabio, a fat version of the male supermodel. I made a hilarious drawing that all my friends at school loved, and then someone showed everyone at school a newspaper ad for a fat Fabio impersonator named Flabio, and it was at that point, at 9 years old, I became a nihilist. As a young adult, VoIP, I thought, what if instead of the 50 telephone lines we have here in our office, we could just use the unused bandwidth from our internet T1S? Our MCI rep explained how this was impossible. He didn't know that MCI engineers, and engineers from all telcos, were already working on it. As a teen, the 6-string bass guitar, tuned just like a regular guitar, but an octave lower. That way, any guitar player could fake it on bass. As a little kid, the gas water heater. Why buy a water heater? All you need is a large insulated container, with a thermostatically controlled gas burner underneath. As a bassist and guitar player, don't try to play a bass like it's just a big guitar. You'll hurt yourself. I thought I had composed Deep Purple's catchy riff for Smoke on the Water. I was 4. I was so excited to play it for my mom, only for her to tell me the song had already been written. Instead of conceding, I assume Deep Purple must have stolen it from me. Yep, they went back in time and stole it from me. Actually, the riff sounds similar to an old jazz standard. Some people actually do believe that they ripped it off, even if completely unintentionally, since John Lord did play a fair bit of jazz and blues before the formation of Deep Purple. I was an airhead little kid. One day I was farting around the house, and a little tune popped into my head, and so I was like riffing on it, just playing with the melody or whatever, and I was like, holy crap, why don't people just come up with songs this way? How has nobody thought of this? Yep. It took me a couple rereads before I finally understood that you weren't literally farting around the house and getting the melody by clenching your buttocks or something like that. The Ponzi scheme. I told other kids I was selling a dime for a nickel, and by the time they were asking to buy a dollar for $2, I would just keep their money. Made $22 in the first grade. I'm not sure I'm understanding this. For an art activity we had to come up with an idea for 4th of July and then draw it. It could be anything, and as a 8-year-old kid I loved Oreos and Pop Rocks. Put those two together and you have a 4th of July Oreo and an easy gold star. Maybe about a month later I see a pack in the store. I truly had believed my art teacher sold my idea for millions of dollars. I was playing with Lego, and I made different men. I added a cape to one, and while the Lego men fought, I let this one be more powerful and gave it the power of flight. I got really excited and told my cousin about it, and he said, like Superman. In 8th grade we did a big invention project. My 2 friends and I invented a few kitchen gadgets, one of which was a twirling fork to facilitate spaghetti eating. We attached a fork to one of those battery-powered hair twister braiders. It kind of actually worked. I saw a battery-powered spaghetti twisting fork for sale at Hobby Lobby a few months ago. Hey, I miss those cool hair twister things. I totally forgot about that. Using the energy from people using workout machines to generate electricity. I had an entire idea of a groundbreaking eco-friendly gym. I had one planned out to pump water into the Middle East so it wouldn't be a desert anymore and the terrorists would stop hating our freedom. I thought I was so smart in secondary school after we started to learn differential calculus when I thought I had invented integration, or as I called it, reverse differentiation. I actually wrote down some rules and everything, thinking how it was funny you could do it backwards too. A few weeks later we moved on to integration and I felt a little stupid for that. This is something that not everyone will understand, but in the early 90s, when a lot of the best games were coming out on CD-ROM, I had this epiphany that if developers could come up with a standardized set of sounds, and every computer came with a chip that had those sounds in it, then the music on CD-ROM games could be stored as MIDI files instead of audio. This would drastically reduce the file size of games and decrease loading times. It would also allow for interesting real-time manipulation of music. Only a few years later, GM, General MIDI, became a thing, which is exactly what I'd envisioned. Sometime in the early 90s we kids were trying to figure out how you could use telephone lines to hook up a whole bunch of video game consoles for supermassive multiplayer where you'd have regions or lobbies for socializing. Something like 10 years later the internet brought matchmaking over dial-up, then cable, and trade chat in Orgrimmar, and Stormwind was eventually born. Went on from there to put together the idea of a massive sci-fi multiplayer FPS with immortal soldiers in a 5-way eternal conflict with high altitude ceilings for aircraft and a resource system. This was about 10 years before PlanetSide 1 came out, doing virtually the same thing. You're demanding space to surface combat in Star Wars Battlefront. But I've had the concept going on paper for space combat between multiple planets for years now, where the entire planetary surface is rendered and available for combat, with a resource, crafting and social system. We didn't really know what to do with these ideas, because at the time processing power, memory, and bandwidth just wasn't available for it, but we're getting to it. Someone else will probably get to this latest idea before I can get it funded, though. The idea of 3D printing. I thought I'd revolutionize storage by breaking things apart to particles and putting them together again from blueprints. I thought up quantum entanglement while writing a sci-fi story. I called it echo particles. I also thought of an imaginary whole number between 3 and 4 called Thrick. I found out later that there's already a math term for that too. Although I don't remember it, my genius will go unappreciated. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.